Hi there, and welcome to Calling All Vegans, where we aim to network, support, and activate the vegan and animal rights communities, discuss the V word in a relaxed but unapologetic way, stamp out speciesism, and encourage pre-vegans to open their eyes, minds, and hearts and become vegan. I'm Sue Spar. This is my friend and co-host, Alec Bose.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And it's always nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us, Alec. When I was about 14 years old, I learned that systemic animal exploitation was a thing. That's when I found out about dissection and vivisection. There was no internet back then, but after convincing my high school biology teacher to not allow a bunch of grade 9 students to slice up dead cats and fetal pigs, I learned all I could about animal experimentation. Fast forward 40 years, we're sitting down with the president and CEO of the Center for Contemporary Sciences, or how about we just go with CCS for the interview, who thinks outside the cage and aims to take the suffering out of medical research, education, and regulatory testing through the use of modern day science, innovation, and ethics, making humans the gold standard animal model, thus leaving behind archaic, unpredictable, barbaric, unreliable, inaccurate animal testing. This means so much to me personally. Please welcome Dr. Aysha Akhtar to Calling All Vegans.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being on the show.
So, as a child growing up, were animals always an important part of your life? And if so, why did you choose to become a human doctor versus like a vet?
Yeah, so actually, I had never known an animal until I was 9 years old. And that's when my grandparents adopted a dog, Sylvester, and my grandparents lived like just a few meters away from us in the apartment building next door. And so Sylvester and we fell in love with each other instantly. And he was the first animal I'd ever known. I visited him every day. He basically became my dog more than anyone else's, and he was my baby. And we just had a bond that was very strong, which I know a lot of children can say the same thing about many animals they've grown up with. So he was the first. And then after that, my family, I'll just say I was just an animal lover. I instinctively just loved animals. Actually, even before Sylvester, I would go out and seek wild animals like squirrels and birds, and I was always fascinated by them. But of course, after Sylvester, that passion was really more solidified. And then animals just became a huge part of my life. I rescued animals. I used to rescue injured and orphaned birds all the time and nurse them back to health. And this is when I was in elementary school. So it was just part of who I became. And then since my parents started adopting cats when I was in high school, animals just have always been in my life. And there's rare moments when I have not had at least an animal or two sharing my home.
Oh, that's great. Now, my maximum number of cats was 13 at one time. How about you?
Yeah, so my parents, my mom and I would rescue and foster cats. And then, of course, we kept all the rejects, basically the ones that were not so pretty, may have temperaments, that other people didn't like. And so we kept them. And so at our peak, we had 17 cats.
Wow. You're a girl after my own heart. I'm one of these people. I can't even, I will choose the dented can or the sad looking vegetable because I feel sorry for them. So, I mean, that obviously translates over into animals as well. So. Now, animals used in labs range from insects to primates. Scientists say they test on animals because they're so alike to humans, but then they also, in the same breath, say they test on them because they're so different. In what areas are animals used in experimentation?
Animals are used across the board in experimentation. So if we break it down, animals are used in education, which goes down even to elementary school, using different types of animals and worms and other critters to dissect and so on, to the use of animals for toxicity testing, and this is often for chemicals and historically cosmetics in this country and household products. They're used for drug development. So the Food and Drug Administration is a regulatory agency that oversees drug development. And with rare exception, they always ask for a new potential drug to be tested on at least 2 different species before they move on to clinical trials. And animals, actually what most people don't realize is that the majority of animals actually are used for what's called basic biomedical research. And this is sort of the curiosity-driven research. This is not applied research, meaning it doesn't have a tangible, concrete end. This is the type of research where if someone wants to know what happens if I scramble this part of a songbbird's brain, how does that affect their singing? And I'm not joking, that's the type of experiment that has been done in the Northwest. Or, you know, if you want to study a certain type of mechanism of Parkinson's, if I alter this gene, for example, what happens? Things like that. So that's where the majority of animals are used in biomedical research. And most of that is funded by our tax dollars.
That's unreal.
That's crazy. So are there any protections to animals in the lab environment, any laws or anything? What's the story with that?
So in the United States, I can't speak to Canada, but I can speak to the United States. There is one regulation called the Animal Welfare Act. It's the only regulation that oversees the use of animals in labs, and as well as for some other purposes as well. But it's a dismal regulation. I mean, it provides practically no protection. First of all, it excludes the majority of animals used in experimentation. Under the Animal Welfare Act, mice and rats, for example, were excluded from the act intentionally. And other animals, including birds and marine animals and invertebrates and cold-blooded animals, reptiles and so on, are not covered under the Animal Welfare Act. So most animals are not even covered under the Animal Welfare Act, as pitiful as that act is. And then for the animals that are covered, we're talking about dogs, monkeys, cats, I think ferrets and some other animals like that. The Animal Welfare Act basically is just kind of a husbandry regulation, meaning it kind of regulates how the animals are kept in labs. That they have to have, you know, unless it interferes with the research, they have to have access to food and water, for example. Dogs are supposed to have a certain amount of room in their cages and things like that. It's pitiful. There is no limit. Now, this is really important. Under the Animal Welfare Act, there is absolutely no limit on what can and arguably has been done to animals in the name of research. Anything can be justified to be done to animals under the Animal Welfare Act. And so that's, the Animal Welfare Act is just, you know, it's the defense that many of those who say, oh, but we're, you know, we follow the guidelines and our animals are well protected and covered by the Animal Welfare Act. Well, that's certainly not true.
Absolutely.
What a joke.
So with that, what is the mission of the Center of Contemporary Sciences, and how did you get involved with all of them?
Yeah, so I'll start with the second part. So I, you know, throughout my medical career, I started to really recognize how bad animal experimentation, how badly it informs human health, and how unreliable it is for human health. And that came to light when I was at the Food and Drug Administration, where I was there for 10 years. And I saw drug after drug that everyone thought was going to be the next big breakthrough for whatever disease. I saw them just fail again and again in clinical trials. Basically, 95% of the drugs that pass animal studies, meaning that they are found to be safe and or effective in animals, fail when tried in humans. So that's a dismal failure rate. And so I saw that again and again. And, you know, there was a real need for a way to address this. And so as I was starting to think about the next step in my career, I heard about this new initiative that was being launched. And there was a workshop held at Harvard Law School for 3 days where that was convened by Nathan Hirschler, who's the executive director of Rise for Animals, which used to be New England Anti-Vivisection Society. So basically we were a bunch of lawyers, scientists, doctors, policymakers, so on. We convened for a 3-day workshop, and out of that, CCS emerged. And then we launched, and I took over, well, I started as its first president and CEO, and we launched just this past May. So we're a very new organization. And our approach is really about really approaching this scientifically. So as you can tell, I'm very much an animal advocate. The ethics of animal experimentation is near and dear to my heart. But I also know, having been in this movement for so many years, that we, unfortunately, concern for animal suffering isn't really driving the change that we need to happen. And so it's going to be the science that's going to drive the change, at least in the next decade or so. And so because of the incredible failure rate of animal testing, it's become widely and increasingly more known that we need something better. So as an organization, the Center for Contemporary Sciences is going to be really working to help replace and create a worldwide shift away from animal experiments towards using testing methods that are based on human biology. That's really where we need to go. We've gotten away from studying human biology. Instead, people are now studying rat biology and monkey biology. We need to get back to studying human biology. And so these new techniques that are really coming out more and more are going to be what's going to drive innovation in medical research and really get animals out of the lab.
Now, CCS proposes to advance human health by pioneering the transition to innovative human-specific medical research and testing methods, as you've said, such as human cadavers, mini brains in a dish, and on-a-chip technology, which I found very exciting. Can you tell us a bit about these and what makes them so exciting as well in seeing the end of animals in research?
These are new tools really that have really come to the fore in the past decade. And so many people are excited about them because unlike traditional in vitro tests, so when we're talking about in vitro, we're talking about not living beings. So in vivo, on the other hand, means a living being, like whether it's a mouse or a human. But in vitro means not a fully living being. And so these new techniques, what's so great about them is that they are so far improved upon the traditional in vitro techniques. They're 3D cultures, they're more complex, and they're getting more complex as time goes on. And we're able to more and more mimic the complexity of human biology with these new techniques. So organs on a chip, for example, is one that's really galvanized a lot of attention. Organs on a chip is basically where you distill an organ to its microcomponents onto a microchip. And that's where everything happens. That's where disease takes place. That's where drug safety, toxicity or effectiveness takes place. It all occurs at the microcomponents. So like a lung on a chip actually functions and breathes like a human lung. And you can study lung diseases, you can study you can tailor medications to treat specific aspects specific parts of the lung biology, for example, the physiology that targets certain diseases. So there's a great deal of enthusiasm about this. And so what researchers are doing now is creating many different types of organs on the chip. Ultimately, the goal would be to link these organs with a circulatory system, maybe a nervous system, a lymphatic system, and so on, so that you've created a human body on a chip. And wow. So what's wonderful about these techniques is that, again, they're human biology, they're human tissues, human cells. So we're not playing guesswork in trying to understand whether something that applies to mice is going to apply to humans. Now, I will say that these techniques are by no way, perfect, and no one testing method is going to be perfect, and no one testing method is going to give us all the answers we need. It's going to take a combination of many different types of testing methods to give us the best picture of human health. But the benefit of these, again, is that you're not playing guessing games, interspecies guessing games.
Well, yeah, animal research is certainly not perfect. So, I mean, anything beyond that is, far better.
Of course, animal research, animal experimentation is not only not perfect, I would say it's really failing the biomedical system currently because of the immense resources and time that goes into it.
Sometimes I say it's fraudulent, but don't mind me.
So you mentioned, lung on a chip. You kind of discussed a little bit about the background of what that entails. Would that be meaningful as a potential COVID treatment or cure avenue to explore?
It's actually being used to study COVID-19 and to look at potential therapeutics for the disease. So yes, lung on the chip is great in that way, and it is being used. And I believe the Harvard Wyss Institute, just WYSS, had an agreement with the Food and Drug Administration to use their lung on a chip to study COVID-19 and potential therapies for it.
Awesome. And I'm sorry, I do have a follow-up on that then. So, and with something like COVID-19, where it has transferred from one species to another, and it acts differently between those species, that's why something like a lung on a chip is important, correct?
Yeah, researchers, research has been trying to recreate the disease that humans get in animals. So they've been infecting different animals, many different species with the coronavirus, but no other species is getting the symptoms, either the full symptoms that we get or the severity of symptoms that humans get. So in other words, as we would expect, another species is not recreating what humans are seeing, what humans are experiencing with the virus. So again, this just all goes back to why we so desperately need human biology-based testing methods. And they will, I guarantee it, they will be the future of biomedical research and will eventually get all animals out of the lab.
Oh, that is exciting. Now, I have no patience for ego, so I love that you and your team are cultivating collaboration. An example of this, let's say, collaborative spirit is demonstrated by having, I hope I get her name pronounced correctly, Charu Chandrasekhara on your advisory council. She's the founder and executive director of your Canadian counterpart, the Canadian Centre for Alternatives to Animal Methods in Windsor, Ontario. Can you tell us more about how you're going to approach things like centralization and information sharing and how this will benefit animals and humans alike?
Yeah, so we're still working on some of that, but one of the things that we're creating right now is a database that's going to be published on our website that really is a database for anyone looking to know where these new technologies are happening, who's creating them, what's being created, how they may be able to be used in their own line of research. That's a database that we're creating for everyone to freely access. So if, for example, you were a researcher in Alzheimer's disease and you wanted to know who's creating a great mini brain disease model that might help me in my Alzheimer's research. And so you can look through our database and hopefully find something that will fit your needs. So that's one of the things we're really trying to showcase what many people are creating. Right now it's a USA-based database, but we intend to expand over time. It's pretty exhaustive. There are so many companies, academic centers, governmental centers creating so many different technologies. So we have to focus on certain types, and as I mentioned, for the US for right now, that's one thing. The other is that we hope to drive media attention to all these techniques. So CCS, what we say about ourselves is we're bridge builders and we're outward facing. It's not about our work. We're really here to showcase what others are doing and to help bring more investment and funding to these technologies so that they continue to be developed and continue to be improved upon, as well as connecting the innovators with the researchers who might be using their tools, and with governmental agencies who might be able to use those tools and so on. So we're really bridge builders, really here to help connect a lot of different factors, a lot of different elements that are involved with all of this research.
That's so good because, I mean, money and ego, people don't like to play sharesies very much in this industry. So what you're doing is amazing.
Thank you.
Animal-free biomedical research is definitely a relatively new idea, and we've always kind of gone with the belief that, you know, we have to choose between the life of a rat or the life of a human, for example, so that we can progress the movement forward with research. But there's also the ethical concerns of animals being animals and not just a tool. They're sentient beings that can't consent to being tested on. How do we work around that? Why are we still allowed to continue to do that sort of thing?
I wish I knew why we were so allowed to continue those things. And I think ultimately it's because most people, first of all, the public largely has a lack of knowledge about a lot of scientific efforts that go on. There's a very little transparency, especially in the United States and maybe in Canada as well, very little transparency about this type of work that is being conducted, how our tax dollars are being used to fund animal experimentation. There's been a lot of defensiveness around the continued use of animal experimentation because a lot of researchers have built their careers on using animals. Medical journals are all about promoting and publishing about animal experimentation. And there are a lot of egos involved in this as well. There's a lot of powers that support the continued use of animal experimentation. However, as I mentioned, that's going to change, and it has to change, because whether people care about this issue about animals or not, they need to care, and I'm sure they do care about their own health, their children's health, their parents' health, their brothers and sisters' health, their spouses' health. And if we really want to promote human health to the best that we can, we need to get away from using unreliable animal experimentation and towards using experiments that are based on human biology, testing methods that are based on human biology, and can really give us the best hope for finding the therapies for our diseases.
That all just makes so much sense. It's, again, money and ego that seems to be what drives it the other way. So in speaking about human biology, we humans all vary from one another, even as in the same species. Never mind jumping over the species barrier. Each species is genetically, biochemically, and physiologically unique. And then you start adding in other factors such as age and sex, induction of disease artificially as opposed to naturally, the stress of captivity, etc. Rather than advance human medicine, does this flawed science actually delay progress instead and end up costing more time, money, animal suffering, and unnecessary harm to humans?
I would argue, yes, it has delayed progress. I think that if we had put the money 10 years ago, 20 years ago, put more of our funding towards developing new technologies rather than continuing animal experimentation, we'd have more methods out there now, better methods out there now that would have really have innovated medical research. So it's so crucial. I mean, it really is. It just comes down to this, the wherever the money goes, that's where the research is going to go. And so we continue to have animal experimentation because that's where the funding is going. If we want to have better testing methods, we just need to shift our funding. It's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sad statement, isn't it? Yeah. Now, many people are waking up to the fact that human survival is tied to that of the health of the planet and our relationship with other animals. So in light of the current pandemic, threats to the natural world, and our healthcare system actually groaning under its own weight, how important is it to take animals out of the research equation and move towards high-tech, cutting-edge, human-specific methods?
I just go back to that 90% failure rate. 90% failure rate in drug development, largely, not completely, but largely because of the continued use of animals in experimentation. Think about it. There's no other industry in this world that would accept such a high failure rate. You know, there's one analogy I often use, but if you were to hop on a plane and the pilot says, okay, you have about a 5% chance of landing safely at your destination, right? You'd hop right back off.
Yeah.
You know, and so you just think about that 95% failure rate. And people don't really think about it so much in drug development, but we're putting our lives at risk with such a high failure rate in drug development, either because it is the drugs that turn out tend to be unsafe, or they're ineffective. So people who have so many diseases, who are waiting year after year for new therapies, for something promising to help them, their lives are at risk as long as we continually you know, emphasize the use of animals in experimentation. So we have to move away from animal experimentation. And yes, I agree. Everything we do, you know, there's such an interrelation, a complex web that we weave when it comes to our relationships with other animals. And this is something that I've personally explored and studied and written and talked about over and over again. But ultimately, our health is very much woven with how we treat other animals, whether it's talking about animals in factory farms, animals in the wildlife trade, animals in wet markets, or animals in experimentation. And ultimately, really what happens is, basically, if you just look across the board, when we treat animals as inanimate objects, when we deny them their basic rights, when we deny them the sentiency that they have, and we treat them with anything less than kindness, respect, and dignity, we also suffer. And so we have to start changing our mindset, start seeing that our well-being is very much tied into the well-being of other animals.
On to a little bit lighter topic. I understand that you dream one day to write and illustrate a children's book. Are Nessie, Petunia-Monster, and Thumbelina, Gremlin likely to be featured in such a book?
Those are my two girls, my two feline girls. It's very possible. My husband will probably be the one to write the story because he is so good at coming up with stories about all our cats. He's so quick at that. And I love to paint and I love to do artwork. And I've increasingly moved towards the whimsical side of things. I think just because they make me just, I don't know, they lighten my mood, right? So definitely. It's very possible that they would show up. It's a cute question. There's so many things I want to do. I'm sure you guys can say the same thing about yourself. There's so many things you want to do and so little time. But yes, it is a dream of mine, maybe in my retirement.
That'd be
Excellent.
nice, yeah. Collabing with your husband. Hopefully it doesn't, you know, it's like when you have to move furniture with someone or something. Hopefully this isn't, you know.
Now, on the topic of authorship, you have actually written a number of books, including our Symphony with Animals, and Animals in Public Health. And we want to make sure to encourage everyone to, if you have an opportunity, to read both of those books because they're amazing.
I have read this book, so I know it's excellent.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, I loved it. Absolutely. And my husband sat down and read it too. So there you go.
Amazing.
Ah.
I'm assuming that donations are gratefully accepted to CCS. How can people support your efforts, and where can people find out more information about the center?
Yes, you can just look up Center for Contemporary Sciences or www.contemporarysciences.org. And thank you for asking. And of course, as every nonprofit organization will say, we're looking for money. We're always looking for money. We need help. We need funding. We're a small organization. We're just getting started, but we have high ambitions and a lot of optimism that we're really going to be able to make some real changes here. So if anyone wants to help us out, please, we would welcome it without a doubt.
Talk about a unique and effective form of activism. If this isn't it, I don't know what is. This is amazing. So Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And like I said, this is near and dear to my heart because it's just been something that blew me away 40 years ago. And here we sit, you know, and it might actually happen. So I'm amazed.
And I just wanted to say to everyone, thank you for watching today. And we appreciate you coming over to our new YouTube channel. Please, if you enjoy the content that we're providing, like and subscribe. If you feel that this is something that would be useful to someone you know, please share it and help get the message out there.
Okay. And just one quick little quote from your website. Most of all, we are nerds and dreamers who believe in the awesome possibilities of science. So there you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for being on the show. It was amazing.
Thank you both so much for having me. Oh, my husband always brings our girls. So this is Thumbelina Gremlin.
Oh,
She's one of the babies. They're 6 months old now. We adopted these two sisters. So
I saw you on the internet.
yeah. And this is Nessie.
Oh.
Nessie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my little soulful little Nessie.
I shouldn't say it. I shouldn't have favorites, but black cats, right? Because they're so demonized, right?
Yeah.
So,
This is actually why we adopted these two, mostly because of her. Because when I saw a black cat, I said, okay, yeah, I know that they're harder to be adopted out.
They sit on the shelf a lot longer, so to speak.
Yeah.
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 Well, thank you again. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.